Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome indeed to Development Control and Regulatory Board. This day, the 13th of February 2020. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live via the County Council website and will be available for viewing on the County Council website after the meeting. Please turn your microphones on when you are speaking and switch them off when you've finished speaking. Membership of the committee today is as printed, and I'd like to welcome Mr Phillimore to the committee. He is replacing David Jennings, who sadly is not with us now. Item number 1 on the agenda is minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of December. Any comments or questions? Move. All in favour? Thank you. Item 2 is question time. No questions have been received. Item 3, questions asked by members under standing orders. No member has asked a question. To advise of any other items the chairman has decided to take as urgent, we have nothing on that either. Declarations of interest. It is noted that all members who are also members of a parish, town, district, council or liaison committee will have a personal interest in those applications which relate to areas covered by those authorities. Are there any further declarations at this time? That's no then, Ewan, thank you. Item 6, presentation of petitions. Any petitions been received, Ewan?
No petitions.
No petitions, thank you. Move on then to item number 7, which is a application at Greenfields Limited, Church Farm, Normington Lane, Normington. Nick, you're dealing with this. Would you present the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. Item 7 is a planning application which is part retrospective, and the application is to use land in connection with the manufacturing of animal feed and discarded foodstuffs and liquids, including the storage of plant and machinery, trailers, skips and materials, including waste packaging, in association with the business, together with office use, vehicle parking, servicing and associated earthworks and drainage. So on the slide at the moment is the application site boundary. This is the site of a former piggery which accommodated approximately 4,000 pigs. About 20 years ago that ceased, at which point shortly after that, the business started to form to use the site for the manufacturing of animal foodstuffs. As I say, this is a part retrospective application, and the part of the site to the east, which we'll show in a moment, is operating lawfully under a lawful development certificate, and you'll see also in a moment that part of the site does not have planning permission, and the intention is that the overall site will be regularised to allow for the use to continue as one. So on this slide we can see to the east of the site, which is hatched in sort of a salmon colour, is the established lawful operations. To the west of the site, which is not hatched, is the area where the activities are not lawful, and in the south western corner you can see this area hatched there's an established builder's yard. That's subject to controls by the district council, not by the county council. So this is the proposed site layout. You'll see this in your application pack. So what we have is a row of buildings on the eastern part of the site. Some of those are in a fairly dilapidated state, but those buildings are used as part of the manufacturing process. You can see there is an area proposed which is outside of the lawful area, which is proposed to be used in connection with the business for circulation, turning, storage of skips, machinery, etc. And then we have a earth bund, which is highlighted here in the darker green, which provides some screening to the western part of the site, and then proposed further to the west, in between the bund and the edge, is sort of grass and landscaping area. Access to the site, you can see, is just off the plan via this track, and you'll see there's an area to the south which is included within the application site boundary, which has been used for skip storage, and this application proposes that be used for staff car parking, so it'll be hard surfaced in a sort of a grasscrete type surface, and it will be used for staff parking. Just a few photographs. So this is a view of the entrance to the site. So it's gravel. The intention is that the first 15 metres would be hard surfaced to allow material from being deposited out onto the public highway, make it a robust surface. A few photographs from within the site. This is towards the west of the buildings, so you can see where the skips are being stored and the condition of the site. This is looking towards the northern boundary. There's an existing wood chip store in this area. And from the eastern boundary, so you can see here what the condition of one of the buildings that's visible. There's a series of buildings on the site of different heights, different conditions, but yeah, some of them aren't in the best condition in the world. And this is a view from the existing screen mound, so this is looking west towards the open countryside. You'll see from the application details it's intended that this area of bunding will be remodelled, slightly lowered, and then it will be landscaped to allow for plants to grow and for additional screening to be provided to the countryside. This is an area south of the access track, so this is the area that I pointed out a few moments ago where it's been used for skip storage, and that's intended to be covered in grasscrete and used for staff car parking. So as part of the application, the applicant has proposed heavy goods vehicle route to and from the A1 to the north. So the application site is visible on the bottom left of these two images. The intention is that vehicles would leave the site, turn left and travel towards the A1, whether they're going in a north or a southerly direction. And the purpose of this HGV routing plan is to prevent heavy goods vehicles from travelling through Bottisford, which is just to the south off the slide. And this will be controlled by Section 106 agreement, so there'd be a planning obligation that would secure the routing of heavy goods vehicles. I should add that the use at the moment on part of the site that is hatched on this plan is operating under a lawful development certificate. So there are no planning conditions that control that use. There's nothing to control the height of material, the hours of operation, any routing of vehicles, and there's no planning restrictions on sort of the nature of the activities or any drainage or any details associated with that. So this planning application presents an opportunity to regularise the use of the site, to put planning conditions and obligations on as part of the planning permission, and that's a key consideration you'll see when you read the report in terms of the recommendation to grant that we're proposing to you. You'll see from the report that the site has been subject to 2 enforcement notices from 2012. And these relate to the land to the south of the access road, which is this area here. That was allowed at appeal, which is now shown as lawful. That was allowed at appeal, so the enforcement notice was dismissed. And the second one relates to land to the west, which is the area in white. That notice is still in effect. So what would happen is, if planning permission is granted today, that would supersede that enforcement notice effectively in terms of allowing the use to continue on the overall site. Just in terms of the key considerations in the report, you can see we've received concerns from Bottisford Parish Council. They're concerned about the operation of the site. They're concerned about the reduction in the height of the bund. They're concerned that there may be additional visual amenity impacts and increased wind to the site. We've also received letters in objection and some comments from residents, of 4 letters in total there, and they're covered in paragraphs 32 to 35. In terms of the planning merits, the site's in the open countryside, and although part of the site is in use lawfully in connection with a waste operation, this planning application will obviously expand further into the countryside. Policy W5 advises that permission will be granted where there's a clear link between the facilities and where there will be transport, operational and environmental benefits, and we believe that there would be benefits as part of this proposal. The earthworks proposed to make the bund more natural and then more capable of being planted up, and that would help with screening and the visual impact of the site. And you can see we're recommending a condition to agree a landscaping scheme as part of this proposal. In highway terms, we have no objections from the Highways Authority. We are recommending planning obligation to deal with the routing of vehicles and also a condition to deal with the hard surfacing, and it would allow the site to be tidied up, hard surfaced and suitably drained. I mentioned about the car parking areas. This will allow that area to be formalised. Again, that will be a benefit in planning terms, and we could allow that land to be sustainably drained as well. We've also got controls as part of the recommendation to limit the storage of waste packaging to 5 metres high. As I said a few moments ago, there's no controls over that at the moment, so this would allow us to have control, and that would be in the interest of visual amenity. Just to bring to your attention, we've received an email from Mr Rhodes, who unfortunately can't be here today, and I will read what he said in his response. He said, "The site and the operations of Greenfields Limited have been the subject of much contention in Normanton for many years. Various efforts have been made to regulate the site, but most have been unsuccessful. However, the certificate of lawfulness seemed to have brought a measure of order, but have not stopped the applicants from operating beyond them when it suited them, as the report makes clear. This application provides an opportunity at long last to provide some boundaries to the activities." You'll see we're recommending approval, subject to planning obligations and conditions. I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nick. I see that there is actually some correspondence from Councillor Rhodes. I would like this to be circulated to the meeting, but Nick has read it out to us, so I suppose that we'll have to do. We have a speaker, Mr Nick Paisley, agent. Are you here, Mr Paisley?
I am, yes.
Yeah, you've got 3 minutes. If you'd like to sit over there at that chair and desk. If you press the button in the middle to start when you start speaking, and obviously turn it off when you've finished. When you've finished speaking, if you'd like just to remain in the seat in case any member would like to ask you any questions on what you have said today, not on the application papers. Ewan will time, it'll be 3 minutes, so begin when you're ready. Thank you.
Chair, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name's Nick Paisley. I'm the planning consultant for the application, working on behalf of the applicant Greenfields Limited. I've only relatively recently become involved with the site, and therefore I've limited knowledge of how it has evolved over time. However, I was brought in by the applicant to help resolve the current breach of planning and, via this application, secure what I hope you will consider a meaningful additional benefits insofar as they relate to highways, the landscape and the environment, over and above simply the matter of regularisation. The proposals seek to afford the applicant additional space to more safely and effectively carry out their existing lawful operations, rather than seek to intensify or expand the existing business. I won't dwell on the particulars of the application proposals, as this aspect has already been amply dealt with in the report and verbally just now. However, I would like to thank your professional officers for their cooperation and constructive approach in dealing with the application and seeking to find an appropriate balance between the needs of the business and development control, but also to reassure members that, if approved, the various conditions attached outlined at the end of the committee report can and will be complied with. In this connection, members should be aware that a long-standing existing supplier has recently committed to invest significant funds as part of buying into the management of the site, and that these funds will be used to carry out the various highways, drainage and significant landscaping and remediation measures offered by the applicant, and as shown on the proposed layout plan referred to in the committee report, and to be secured by the various planning conditions. Such funds will be triggered on the grant of planning consent, and therefore, if approved, I can confidently reassure you that the conditional requirements, both in extent and timescales, should be considered to be absolutely realistic and achievable. At present, the site operates under 2 existing lawful development certificates. If approved, the application will effectively replace these with a single planning consent, which will enable your officers to far more easily monitor compliance with the various conditions moving forward. To conclude, approval of the application this afternoon will secure important highway, environmental and landscape benefits over and above the existing situation, and result in a far more orderly and safer working environment to the benefit of all. For these reasons, it's hoped you feel able to support and approve the application in line with your officer's recommendation, subject of course to planning conditions and the signing of a 106 agreement. Should you have any questions whatsoever, I will gladly answer them as far as I'm able. Thank you.
Yeah, I think just a little bit of clarification, Chairman. Say you'd be able to start these immediately, these works immediately on granting the planning permission. So have you got a date for that, assuming that you do get planning permission today? And how long will it all take? What's your timescale?
Well, there's the conditions require the submission of further details within so many months of the decision. If planning consent is granted this afternoon, my next instruction will be to get these details together as quickly as possible and submit them to discharge those, and then to crack on with it.
So further clarification, once that stage has been completed, how long will it take you to get all this done?
I don't know. I've not gone through that exercise, but the point is that the funder, the investor, will be undertaking those works as soon as possible and cracking on with it. It's for a lot of the drainage and the infrastructure will help from an operational point of view and make it far more orderly, and therefore there's every incentive to do that straight away rather than prolong that, just from an operational point of view.
Mr Phillimore, did you indicate? I think you did.
Thank you, Chair. It's really for Mr Thomas. Could you jump back to the routing, the HGV routing?
This is just questions of the
Oh, is it?
agent, yes.
Oh, right. Sorry. Withdraw that then.
I'm coming later.
No more questions.
Thank you.
Did you want to direct your question, Mr Phillimore, to Nick?
I will now. Apologies, members. First step in this one. I'm just curious about clarification on A, size of vehicles, because HGV is anything up to 40-odd tonne. Paragraph 16 indicates this move on to the A1. How does that actually prevent vehicles coming through the village if they're coming from the south? I'm just curious as to what certainty there would be that the operators would actually stick, because I think this is suggesting they will come on and off the A1 at all times, and I'm just curious to ask how we're going to stop them coming through the village from the south.
Thank you, Chair. There is a paragraph 6. There is a HGV 7.5 tonne weight restriction covering the Normanton and Bottisford area. What this will seek to provide is assurances through a legal agreement, which would be enforceable through the courts if necessary, if there are breaches, to ensure that those vehicles entering and leaving the site do so via the north and don't go the other way. But there will be separate controls. If there are already 7.5 tonne limits for size of vehicles, then that could be enforced in the normal way through the police, by the police. So it's actually a belt and braces approach. We have a control that's been offered by the applicant, which the Highway Authority agree with. that would allow us, through the legal agreement, to monitor, and if we get complaints, to potentially enforce that way. But also, if there are HGVs in connection with this business or not in connection with this business that breach the 7.5 tonne regulation, the police can take action that way as well, which is more than what you get on a typical development.
Okay.
It's down to enforcement then, isn't it, ultimately? Okay, thank you.
Michael.
You
Sorry,
look,
it was a
you
long
look
time
worried,
coming.
Chair. No, I'm not going to oppose this application. It's just a question, really, on paragraph 54, non-compliance. I mean, it says in 2013, as Nick has already said, one was allowed, one was dismissed. But in the intervening 7 years, apart from the actual notice, what enforcement action was actually taken? Because to me, it seems none, apart from a letter being sent saying you're now under enforcement. What physical action did we take in those 7 years?
As I understood, there wasn't any formal action through the courts during that time period, but we had the option to do that. But that notice would obviously run with the land forever until it's either superseded or revoked. But that is in place, and this planning permission would supersede it. So we didn't take action, whether that was because the nature of the operations at that time wasn't such that what warranted court action, or whether it wasn't expedient for other reasons. I can't say. I don't know the answer to that question. But what this will do was supersede that notice. But we would have had the option at the time, obviously, to enforce if we felt that there were, planning impacts, complaints from local residents. But for whatever reason, whether we didn't get complaints or whether when it was monitored it wasn't deemed to be so bad as to proceed with prosecution, but no action was taken.
I understand each case needs to be looked at on its own merits or dismerits, but when enforcement is... The public looks at you taking enforcement after 7 years, they may well have hoped for something more than has happened, and I have sympathy with them.
I absolutely agree. Typically, where a notice is served, it's possible that it was complied with either substantially or wholly during that time. It's possible. But quite often when notices are served, they have an impact in terms of encouraging the person carrying out the breach to scale back what they're doing or to cease, and that can be have an impact. I'm sure if this was causing the problems that would have led to serving the notice, that local residents would have complained, and that potentially could have led to prosecution.
Tony.
Thank you, Chairman. Any comments from Mr Rhodes regarding this application?
Well, Nick did read
You've read it out?
communication out.
Yeah, I thought I heard right, so I'll move the recommendations, Chairman.
Did you want to speak, Ian? Sean.
Yeah, Chairman, I was trying to secure from Mr Baisley some sense of when the works will be completed. I just wonder if the officers can offer any help on that. I think it's important that they're done within a reasonable time, and hopefully the conditions will ensure that that happens.
We've got conditions, as the agent has mentioned, to require that certain elements are discharged at certain periods of time, and that ranges from within 6 months, some are within 3 months. So there's different periods of time for compliance or discharge of various conditions, and then there are time periods to comply. As with any planning permission, we can't force an applicant to carry out those works. They could choose not to implement this planning permission. They could just implement in accordance with the lawful development certificates. We have every reason to suggest that they will want to do it. Operationally, this will improve the efficiency of the business, and I think they'll be very keen to crack on and do these works. We don't have definitive dates. As the agent said, that comes down to funding, weather conditions, and all sorts of other matters, how the business operates, and that's a matter for the applicant.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded by Tony and Ian. If there's no more further comments, we'll move to the vote on this. All in favour of the recommendation? That looks looks to be pretty unanimous, I think, Ewan. Thank you very much. Moving on then to item number 8, which is Fernvale Primary School, Summerby Road, Fernby. Oliver, you're dealing with this, I understand, so if you'd like to present the report then, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is for the variation of a condition on an existing planning permission for a mobile classroom at Fernvale Primary School. Fernvale Primary School is located in Thurnby, which is to the east of Leicester. The school's in a residential area and surrounded by residential dwellings and local roads, as you can see on this slide. Access to the school is from Summerby Road, which is to the south. To give some background, planning permission was granted by the County Council in September 2019 for a 2-storey classroom block and sprinkler tank on the northwestern part of the school site, and you can see it as this block here on the plan on this slide. The planning permission also included extensions to the car park, as you can see encompassed within the red line for this application. And then this following slide shows some elevation examples of what the modular classroom block looks like. So the 2019 permission was granted subject to a number of conditions, including condition 3, which limited site preparation and construction works, deliveries and movement of materials and machinery to between 7:30 and 6 o'clock on weekdays and between 7:30 and 1 o'clock on Saturdays. This application is seeking a variation to condition 3 to allow weekend working outside of these hours on up to 2 occasions to allow the delivery and installation of the modular classroom block. The applicant intends to deliver and install the classroom during February half term, which is next week when the school is closed. The proposed change to condition 3 is to enable weekend working in the event that adverse weather conditions prevent the operation of the crane during the half term next week. The amended condition 3 would allow weekend working to take place on Saturday and Sunday between 7:30 and 6 on up to 2 weekends, with advance notification having been given to the County Planning Authority. No objections have been received from statutory or technical consultees. One representation has been received from the public, which objected on the basis of additional noise and vibration, which they have already experienced from the building works at the school undertaken so far. Overall, the impact of occasional, limited weekend working to facilitate the delivery and installation of the additional classroom already permitted would not significantly impact on amenity and is considered acceptable. As such, the recommendation is that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in the appendix. Happy to take any questions.
Yep. Thank you, Oliver. I understand there's nothing from Mr Galton as far as observations. Is that right?
I've not received any comments from Mr Galton, no.
Okay. The recommendation is on page 27. Comments from the floor?
Second, Chair.
Okay. Mr Phillimore.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just really curious. Page 30, paragraph 11, the travel plan, which you want confirming and agreeing with LCC in writing, but you're talking about this work starting next week. Why would we need it? You know, and what's actually in that travel plan? Just curious, because the extant planning permission is there to do the work. This is just an extension to allow work on 2 weekends. So I'm just curious, I think, rather than confused, just curious.
Okay, so Yeah, condition 11 relates to a school travel plan, which is predominantly about the travel and transportation choices that are made by the pupils at the school and the employees, the staff, how they get to school, where they park. It's about encouraging use of public transport and walking operations. So that's relates to the kind of ongoing operations of the use of this site as a school, and is not concerned with the construction of this modular classroom.
Does beg the question, why is it in the report then? If it doesn't relate to the application that we're considering, why is it in the report?
Okay. So the report that we have before us today is about a variation of one of the conditions that's attached to the original planning permission. So when we renew planning, or when we vary a condition, we will repeat all of the conditions that relate to the original planning permission.
Makes perfect sense, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded by Ian and Tony. If no one else wants to speak, I'm going to put it to the vote. Ian or Tony, did you want to speak before? No. Okay. Well, we'll move to the vote then. All in favour of the recommendation? Thank you. I think that's about unanimous, I think. Thank you. Moving on then to item number 9 is a receive a note item on delegated decisions made by officers. If I would like someone to move that we accept the agenda item and the report. All in favour? Thank you. That looks to be unanimous on that then, Ewan. Item number 10 seems to be a lot of talk going off and nobody listening to the chairman. Pretty good. Item number 10 then is any other items the chairman has decided to take as urgent. We haven't any of those. And 11 chairman's announcements, and it's still carrying on. Not very professional at all. Chairman's announcements, well, thank you very much for coming. And I close the meeting.